Howdy, folks. Happy Tuesday. We have some non-hockey stuff to start with and then some actual hockey stuff to start with. Some encouraging words out of a couple league GMs that nothing is confirmed right now. Nothing is locked down, but starting to get the feel when a couple GMs come out and say things positive that's indicative of that actually being the case. But we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But we'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
So the one story that I thought was funny was, Tom Brady lives in Tampa now, and
Derek Jeter, he's renting Derek Jeter's old home,
which apparently is pretty big.
Sure.
But he wanted to get out of the house, and he decided he would go to a park that was closed to work out. And the park rangers went up to him and they cited him. Now, whether that citation took or not, or they just basically did it to ask him to leave, that's up in the air. Of course, ESPN saw no wrong in this. 3 panelists, and not one of them had a problem with it. My basic problem is this. Just because you're Tom Brady doesn't mean you get to go walk in a park and work out by yourself. You can't, just like your neighbor can't, just like nobody else can. And he thinks he can. And that's the problem that I have here. And the fact that ESPN basically said it was okay that athletes are entitled kind of made me mad. And that is, to me, a systemic problem now in this country. It's like, I have nothing against athletes, but if you're a guy like that really thinks you can get away with it, that's not good.
Well, I think the fact that it is an athlete, it is a celebrity, is the reason why
that's why we know about it. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is sort of shooting something across the bow to send a signal to everybody else. Now, I'll use a local example. There was and I won't name the bar, but there was a bar in North Buffalo. There are a couple of the bar strips in the city of Buffalo. Hurdle Avenue is one of them, and this is sort of just a corner bar type of location. And unbeknownst to me, and unbeknownst to probably anybody other than their exclusive clientele, probably the people around the block, they had an unofficial happy hour while everything was shut down. Well, they got shut down and cited.
Good.
For that. That's stupid. I mean, if you're flying in the face of what the state and what the city are doing at this point, that's dumb. Somebody going out and throwing a football around in a park.
The park is closed, Mike, by law.
It's like the golf courses, or there's no.
That's fine, but then you know what? He can go on the golf course like everybody else. The fact is, my problem here is the mindset was he thought he'd just sneak on there and it would be okay. And it wasn't. And good for Tampa for doing it. Now, did Tampa have to make it public? No, they did not. But right. I think it was good that they policed it because, again, I don't think anybody should get any special treatment under these circumstances. And that's showing, because, again, there are people that are really suffering, having problems, having money problems, all kinds of things. You know what? If Tom Brady doesn't feel like he can work out at his, how many thousand square footage house, then that's his problem.
And ironically, the state of Florida has been one of the states that's been sort of criticized for not being as closed as other states.
Well, that's why they've gotten this way, because they're like the 11th worst state in the United States, and they shouldn't be, but they are. And everybody in Florida wants to say, well, it's all in Palm Beach. Like everybody says, oh, it's in New York. But again, the big key here is that's all that because that's all that the testing is still not right. Right. And so you can't hang your hat on the fact that even if you live in an area that's sparse, that it's not around you. It's just that you don't know that it's around you. We're still in that spot, unfortunately.
I heard somebody make the case, and we'll get off of the COVID-19 and talk about other stuff. I heard somebody state the case that this, like, if people aren't aware of, the state of Georgia is essentially going to open up in stages starting on Friday, with like places to get your hair done and bowling alleys and things of that nature, and then restaurants next Monday. And they said that, well, if there is a spike in Georgia, that is going to affect the professional sports restarting, because this is proof that opening up is not a good idea. And I'm like, I think that's completely wrong for one simple reason. The sports opening up, and as we're going to talk about in a little bit, is going to be in sort of these biospheres, or in like they're going to be in hotels, and they're going to be in certain cities. It's not going to be like they're going to be living in their houses and going to a Panera and going to the local restaurants. It's not going to be resuming the normal lifestyle. It's going to be a very limited one. So I don't think one has to do with the other. And you can almost predict that Georgia will probably have a spike because people are going to be out there, but some people are saying that that is going to be the price that you pay for opening things up. I don't know what's right and what's wrong, but I don't know. It's just it's a bizarre situation.
It is.
But okay, so getting off of that, I wanted to touch on this yesterday, but we got into it with Ted Starkey at the beginning of the show and didn't want to interrupt the flow of talking about hockey. On the weekend, this event that was on, I don't know if it was on all the channels. I just know it was on. I know it was on one channel, and it included such luminaries as Taylor Swift and Keith Urban and Paul McCartney and the Rolling Stones. I think it was called All Alone Together. I didn't watch it live. I saw snippets of it afterward, and I'm glad I saw snippets of it afterward because it allowed me to fast forward or shut it off very quickly. I love Paul McCartney. He's one of my favorite musicians, and he was like in his den singing Lady Madonna, and he sounded really bad, and it made me sad because he's not ill, but he's in his, I think, mid-70s, and I saw him live a couple of years ago, and he was great, and that makes me wonder whether they were using some sort of audio track. And I don't know if he was lip syncing or he was just singing along with it, but he did not sound great. And, I give him a lot of credit for, doing what he did for this event. The Rolling Stones, I laughed at how bad it was, Russ. Seeing Charlie Watts do air drums.
Yeah.
And Ron Wood and Keith Richards and Jagger doing Waiting on a Friend, I think it was.
Yeah.
Why?
I don't understand it. If he didn't want to play drums, then don't play. Just don't have him in there. I
think they were using a click track. I think that's what they were doing. Right,
but it's not him at that point live. So it's like, what is the point?
Yeah. Now I didn't see. I know that Taylor Swift did something, and Eddie Vedder did something, and Keith Urban did something. I appreciate the fundraising aspect of it. I don't know. Maybe I'm too harsh a critic on musicians and being put in those situations, and it's not the optimum situation in terms. Like they did something after Hurricane Katrina. And I remember John Mayer and Eric Clapton did something, and it was great. But it was in a studio scenario, and it was pristine, and the sound was great. When you're doing something, and it's more the spirit of the thing, but when you're doing it on a computer, when you're doing it on Zoom, and the sound isn't good, and the picture isn't good, and the music isn't the way it should be, it sort of takes all the greatness out of it.
It does take some of the greatness out of it. Everybody's doing what they can as far as how the music goes and how it is played. And to me, if it's not all live, I have no interest in it. That's just the way it is. I would rather hear just Jagger on his guitar doing it himself acoustic. If that's the way he wants to do it, that's fine with me, than trickery and other stuff. It's like, what are we listening to then? You see, the problem I always have with these taped musical performances, we don't know what they do afterwards to enhance them, if they enhance them. And I don't like that.
It was clear that the Keith Urban thing was not live because they had an image of him playing with two other images of him. So it had to have been, unless it was some sort of trickery or some sort of duplication that they did. It was him playing guitar, him playing rhythm guitar, and him playing something else.
Yeah.
So it had to have been recorded. And honestly, if you're going to record it, and it's then it's got to be of a good quality. to make it worth my while. I would rather watch like older concert movies that were better quality.
I'm glad they raised all the money for charity.
Yes,
Don't get me wrong, that's terrific. Lady Gaga put it together, and I think it was like 1.2 million or something.
Yeah,
maybe a little higher. That's fantastic. I'm just talking, musically. I'd like to see it a little better. That's all.
Swinging to baseball here, and we'll talk about the new plan in talk about that first.
Okay.
Remember a couple weeks ago, it came out that first it was Arizona only. Then it was Arizona and Florida, and basically it sounded like they were going to play in front of no people in the spring training facilities. Not like in one city, but like in Clearwater, in Lakeland, in Tampa, that type of thing. Now all of a sudden, yesterday it came out, Florida, Arizona, and Texas. Now I remember, I know last week you said you had heard from people that and that it didn't sound encouraging.
And I think that got out, and I think that's why they're taking another kick at the can here.
Right.
Here's the one thing, though, and we'll talk about hockey during the show. Do you get any sense of a good plan here with baseball? This is the biggest problem here, is that every trial balloon that we hear for baseball, it's so easy to poke holes in and say it's not a great plan. It just seems like whoever is strategizing there isn't doing a great job. I mean, tell me if you've ever thought any of these sounded like, yes, this is terrific, I'm all on board, this will work. Have you felt like that for any of them?
Yeah.
Take away the fact that you want baseball. We all want it.
Yeah, I mean, it with baseball, it seems to be the one that is sort of like the most chaotic, because they haven't started the season. B, we know that there's going to have to be, whatever they're going to do, there's going to have to be a 2 to 3 week lead up at least to get like pitchers' arms back to where they were, and everybody, back 100% to in the direction they were just before the beginning of the when spring training was shut down. You don't know the length of the season. You don't know the structure of the divisions. You don't know what the playoff format is going to be. I think baseball is doing themselves a disservice because they're keeping their options so wide open that nobody has any confidence in what they're going to do. So it's like, I thought that the idea of mix matching the divisions, like they came out a couple weeks ago. I mean, I don't like the fact that they're not going to be the Yankees aren't going to be in the division with the Red Sox and their traditional rivals. But for this scenario, to do it for 1 year just to get a season done, I'm willing. And like, I don't like the idea of the DH throughout. Then there is no American and National League. It would just be these 30-team, 6 divisions, 5 teams. Okay, to get through the year, to make things uniform, fine, that's great. But you got to come out with some sort of structure. You've got to put forth something that people
like. You don't hear baseball GM saying we're definitely going to be back, because I think they're confused too.
Right. I mean, I think Major League Baseball, and by the way, Rob Manfred, I saw on the ticker yesterday that he basically gave teams the go ahead to be able to like, if they want to fire managers, I think they meant in the minor.
They could furlough managers and coaches and people who work for the team. But if baseball is definitely happening,
why would he be doing that?
What is that saving you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and we talked about this last week, the fact that first it was Wilpon. First it was Jeff Wilpon. Then Scott Boras came out and pushed back against, the sort of the hint from the major leagues that, okay, you're going to have to eat some of the losses that we're going to have, meaning if we lose 40% of our revenue, then you're going to have to reduce your salaries.
Which they did in that first agreement.
Right.
And then the owners wanted to redo it again.
Right.
And I think that is causing problems too.
Because I think they thought that they would be up by Labor Day Memorial Day, and now they probably realize it's going to be closer, maybe June, maybe even July 4th. And I don't think there's any way you're getting a 100-game season in if you're starting at July 4th. It's going to be like an 81 games.
It will be 80 games, I think.
Yeah.
I think 80 games is right where you're getting. But again, just with us talking about these different plans, You don't hear one person other than Rob Manfred out of baseball with any kind of confidence that baseball is going to happen. That's the interesting thing. Even players aren't interviewing. Have you noticed that? Like the hockey players have interviewed all over the place. Baseball players, not really.
Yeah, I very, very, and I don't. For some reason, I want to say I thought there was a Mike Trout interview recently, but yeah, like I haven't heard like the Yankees on the Yes Network or on ESPN Radio or any Mets doing interviews. Like,
Pete Alonso's
doing like a fundraising thing, and that's
right. And Jeff McNeil was on SportsCenter one day. Yeah, but I'm telling you, for all the players they have, what is there, over 800 players? We're not hearing from them. And again,
that's got to be the major leagues telling them don't do interviews.
It could be, and it also could be the PA saying, listen, we don't know what the landscape is. And to be fair, the baseball players would have to stay away from their families the longest. Again, this is why I gave the edge to the NBA and the NHL, because they got through most of their season. Baseball hasn't started, and that's why they're in the worst situation. We originally, when we all weren't sure how long this would possibly go, thought maybe baseball would be in the best situation because they didn't really start it. But now it looks like they're in the worst situation because they didn't really start it, only because they didn't have a rock solid plan.
Yeah, and I'll say this, and then we'll get started.
Yep.
The NFL, for people who think that the NFL is in danger of like not starting their season on time, believe me, they're the league that makes the most money from TV. Yeah. They're the league that can deal with not having fans in the stands or limited fans in the stands the best. They're getting billions of dollars from ESPN, ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox. They need to put the product out. They will play in empty stadiums if they have to, and I think they will do it on schedule because these networks are dying for content. So I don't think there's a danger of them missing games or pushing the season back at all.
I think you're right. I think ultimately you're right. We'll still wait and see, though. I don't know.
Yeah. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Tuesday, April 21st, 2020.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and I finally got it right that I said 2020 instead of 2019. And this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Okay, let's start with the news that we reported yesterday, which after the show got reported as it not taking place or it being rejected by the NHL. And that was the one-year signing of Mikhail Grigorenko by the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, from what I understand after the fact, because we all know Grigorenko was a first-round pick of the Sabres. I think it was 2012.
12 sounds right.
Yeah.
11 or 12, but I think 12 sounds right.
Right. Played a few years in Buffalo, got traded in the Ryan O'Reilly deal to Colorado, played a few years in Colorado, then went to the KHL. He signed, his deal was not an ELC. It was a standard player contract. And because it was, apparently he has to wait until July 1st, or
whenever that new date is,
or whenever the new date is. And by him signing before that, I mean, his KHL contract, his KHL season was done, but the NHL season isn't officially done until after the Stanley Cup playoffs or after the league cancels it. So they rejected that deal. Now Columbus came out and said, we're going to sign, we will refile this on July 1st. So the $1.2 million that he's getting in that deal is likely going to be the same amount that he gets on July 1 or whatever the new date is. But so that's just, it's not really a ton of news there, but I mean, it did.
Well, it's interesting how it makes it look like Columbus tried to sort of slip it in, and the NHL registry said, but he's going to get signed. Like, we all know that. I just think this is a little game of cat and mouse. Maybe, my guess is maybe other teams were interested in him, and that's why Columbus tried to get that done quickly, because now that it's not a signed deal, what if another team offers more money? Like, that is a possibility now.
Yeah, but I think he agreed to it. I think he'd be
okay, Mike. It's a handshake agreement?
No, not a handshake agreement, but I mean, yes. Could some team come in and say, okay, we'll offer you 1.3.
Or even 1.5. Let's say someone says, hey, we're going to give you 1.5 if you rip up the other deal.
Yeah.
he might rip up the other deal, Mike.
It's possible, but I think there would be a backlash against that general manager if somebody did that. That's don't you think? Don't you think they would
to some degree, sure, but I mean, again, everybody's playing by the rules, but then everybody sort of looks to see what they could get away with the rules too, right?
Right. So what this means is that guys like Nikita Nesterov, who played in the NHL before, and I know that I don't think Shipachov is coming back. I know that
he's not actually. The article that I posted the other day said he's staying, and Dmitry Jaskin signed a new deal over there too because they're teammates and they like playing with each other. That's another guy and another reason why I posted that bit from the KHL, because Dmitry Jaskin would fit perfectly in the NHL again. I mean, he's not old. He's like 28. He's
a good third line guy, strong, tough winger.
Yep.
But yeah, and guys like Alexei Marchenko played for Detroit and Toronto. I mean, there was rumors about him coming back over. So those players have to wait, even though
if you're a UFA, you could sign anytime.
Right. I mean, that's the limbo here with
never drafted UFA. That's what the big key is. You can never have been drafted.
Right. So
Bob McKenzie sort of cleared that one up.
Yeah. That's why Barabanov, the guy the Leafs signed, he was not drafted, and he was 25 years old. He still had to sign an ELC.
Right.
Or a guy like Marchenko, or a guy like Grigorenko, they're not signing an ELC because they've already played under an ELC in the NHL. Now, the interesting thing is guys like Kaprizov or drafted players, I believe they could sign at any time because
I think they have to wait for that date for when the KHL was supposed to end.
May 1, yeah.
Yeah, May 1st, I think, is the date. But I'm telling you, I'm iffy about Kaprizov since they're holding the Olympics over the players' heads. He might opt to wait on that, and if he waits on that, I think that's it for the Wild. I think his rights run out.
Well, I believe that they hold his rights up to the age of 25,
and I think in 2 years, I think he will be 25.
Yeah, now it might be different because he was drafted. I mean, remember, Panarin stayed in the KHL until he was 24 or 25. But he was never drafted, so he could come over. Right, he could come over. He signed an ELC. It was sort of like Barabanov. Kaprizov, I don't know, since there's
Kaprizov will be 23 April 26th, so he would be 25 at that point. But he has to extend for 2 years if he wants to play in the Olympics.
I think the factor here, though, is there is no transfer agreement between the KHL and the NHL, and because there isn't, Minnesota may hold his rights in perpetuity. They may.
I don't think so. I heard
there's got to be a limit, but apparently, I think it's very vague.
It is vague. There's no question, and I've seen all kinds of speculation on it. It's an interesting thing. There's no question about it. Let's see. Mike Russo wrote about him April 10th. Let's peek into that.
Okay. While you're looking at
that, I will say this.
Okay.
A couple of years ago, I told Mike Russo he was not coming over, and Mike Russo told me, well, Chuck Fletcher just told me he is, and I said, well, I got word from Russia he isn't. You do what you want, and he did not come over, and so that's so just to show you how weird these situations can be. So
I'll see your Chuck Fletcher and raise you a Russian source.
Yeah. And that's what it boils down to. It does say here that with Kaprizov on the verge of signing his first NHL contract, two significant things have changed since the most recent of the never-ending updates about the Wild's most heavily anticipated prospect. The biggest update with the Wild anxious to sign him, the young Russian star, is seeking new representation. Uh-oh. So
I don't know who his representation was before. If it
was Milstein, he would sign.
I was gonna say if Milstein, he gets along.
He gets guys here.
Yes. I'll tell you this, and this is a could be a connective thing with Kaprizov. When we were talking at the trade deadline, and there was the talk about them trading Zach Parise.
Actually, hold on. So here's an update. Yep. Somebody put an update on. So apparently, Guerin will talk to Kaprizov when he has officially chosen an agent.
Okay.
So he hasn't even spoken to him about this contract yet. So this is what I'm saying. This whole thing with Kaprizov, it's all very fluid, man.
Yeah. But what I was going to say is, at the deadline, we heard deadline day of this trade involving Zach Parise going to the Islanders, involving Andrew Ladd. I get the feeling that, and I mean, obviously they would be doing that for cap reasons, but I get the feeling also that they'd be willing to trade Parise if they knew for a fact that Kaprizov was coming over, because Kaprizov would sort of take that top six role that Parise fills. And if he doesn't come over, does that scuttle? Because a lot of people think that deal is going to happen in the offseason when they can straighten out all the cap ramifications. That'll be interesting to see, because granted, we're talking about one player who's 23 years old, one player who's in his mid-30s and has term left on his contract, and you would think, well, one doesn't have anything to do with the other. Well, right. One has to do with the other in the sense that they're not trading Parise unless they have a player that fills his spot, because they're not a rebuilding team. Craig Leopold has made it clear, in spite of all my pleadings for them to not tank, but to
they're not doing it.
They're not doing it. They're going to try to do it on the fly, and that means if you're trading Parise, you need somebody to replace him in your top six.
I think what's going to happen with Parise is I do really feel like at some point he is going to go back to the Islanders, but I think that's going to happen in season. Whenever there's a season, I don't think it'll be this season, right? Because this season's crazy enough. But I think whenever there is a season, the next season, the 2021 season, it wouldn't shock me if at some point Zach Parise is traded to the Islanders, and that's when, Leopold's willing to do it and gets a good deal. I think he will make this one more run with Parise, and that's why he's saying he's not anxious to rebuild or do it. And I just think kind of he's going to slip in that Guerin's going to slip in that trade one day, and because Guerin wants to trade him, that's obvious. Yeah, and so I think it will happen, but I think because of PR and because maybe they do have a chance in the playoffs this year because of an expanded playoff, they're going to wait. So there's no point in talking about it right now.
Jan, we were talking about the Grigorenko contract and it getting rejected and the reasons why, and we're sort of talking about some of the other players who, guys like
we just brought up Kaprizov, the fact that he has no representation, so Guerin won't talk to him yet.
And I extrapolated from that I don't think we know what was talked about on deadline day, that they were going to trade Parise, but they couldn't get all the numbers worked out. I don't think a team like Minnesota, who is clearly not interested in rebuilding, that they would trade Parise unless they had a Kaprizov to replace him in their top six. And if he doesn't come over, does that mean that Guerin holds back on trading a guy like Parise?
I'll say a little bit. As Russ said, there was definitely talk that he was going to be traded at last deadline. The problem is twofold. One, 5 years left. Two, $7.5 million left, which is a large chunk of change.
Sure.
The question is how much is Minnesota going to be willing to eat? Obviously, they can eat right now up to 50%, but I just don't see Minnesota eating that amount to get rid of him. What's the return going to be? And Parise, after a very slow start this year, actually played very well.
He did.
He was having a pretty good season. Tailed off a little bit towards the end, but that middle 2 to 3 month period, he was, I wouldn't say he was one of the better forwards in the league, but he was definitely a player of the ilk of which we've seen from Zach Parise in the past. So you're not giving up a guy who's completely at the tail end of his career. The hope is if he does go to the Islanders, is you pair him with a Barzal, right? It may be a Barzal, Lee, and Parise line is the kind of line that gets the Islanders moving forward, because we've talked about a lot, they're not going anywhere without any scoring, especially secondary scoring. And right now, Brock Nelson had that nice run. They've had a couple other guys, but they lack that secondary scoring, which Parise could provide on a first or second line.
Well, this is the thing I don't understand, that I didn't understand on that day about that particular rumor, because Parise's contract is one that is applicable to the cap recapture penalty. He's got 6 years left after this year at $7.5 million. And in the deal that was reported, Andrew Ladd was going back to Minnesota. He has 3 more years left at $5.5 million. So or it's five more years for Parise after this year. So you're talking about a difference of
you're $2 million a year, but you're talking about a guy who actually can play the game and a guy who's done nothing.
Right. Yeah, I don't think that was a complete deal.
There's no way Minnesota getting the money back doesn't do anything. I mean, it offsets it. But in my opinion, if the Islanders are doing that, guess what? You're paying an awful lot more than you thought originally because you're making a team take on $5.5 million in dead cap space, in my opinion.
Yeah, but Minnesota opens himself up to the cap recapture if Parise retires before the end of the 5 years. Whereas if he retires with Minnesota, they probably could convince
He's not going to retire, though. He's not.
For 5 more years? You think he's going to play in his 40s?
Zach Parise, you'd be surprised. He seems to be doing better now the last 2 years with his neck than he was 3-4 years ago. I think he has turned a corner in the sense that he can continue to play. He's not going to be Zach Parise of old where he gets 90 points, but I do think he'll play right up until he's 40. He's pretty strong-willed guy. I do think that trade, though, like I said, was completely lopsided and it was going to be something else involved. I think for that trade to happen, the Islanders would have to give up either Wallstrom or Beauvillier in the deal, depending on how much Minnesota is willing to eat, because Minnesota is going to want something back for doing it. They just don't want cap relief.
I mean, the difference.
Minnesota. I mean, their big thing also is when Stalock took over between the pipes. I mean, Stalock played awfully well, outplaying.
He was great.
That was the turnaround for their season once they were forced to go to him. So, I mean, I don't think any of us thought Minnesota was going to do any damage if they made the playoffs. But I do think they were a viable playoff contender when the season got halted.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. That season was weird because Dubnyk had the family problems. He went away, and then Stalock really starred. And when Dubnyk came back, he was better. But clearly, whatever it was probably still on his mind, and Stalock was having a career year. So they could be a dangerous team. You never know. And
they played better after they fired Boudreau. It was clear.
Yeah, there's no question.
That's a given. But
yeah. Now the other Russian connected story, and it's not a big signing, but it's Vasily Demchenko, a Russian goaltender who played 7 years over in the KHL, signs a 1-year ELC with the Canadians. I looked up his stats. He had a .930 save percentage 3 years in a row for Chelabinsk Tractor, which that's pretty good numbers. Not a great winning percentage, but I think that's tied to how good that team is. And I don't memorize the KHL standings, so I couldn't tell you. But no, I don't. I do have a little bit of a life for us. But it's curious just simply because Montreal right now, they've got Price, they've got Lindgren as the number 2 in Montreal, they've got the number 1 prospect in Primo. That's what I'm a little puzzled at. Are they going to, I
think Lindgren's gone. He's not really in the plans anymore, and I think Primo is going to be the goalie behind Price in the NHL. If it's not this year, then maybe that's why they're bringing in the KHL guy. Maybe they're going to put that off a year, but Primo's probably ready for the NHL. That's the thing.
And you're not getting rid of Price with that contract. They'd be very hard pressed, even if they wanted to.
No, they're not getting rid of it.
To find somebody who's going to take on $10.5 million a year, or even half of that for the remaining of the contract.
Jan, that's why I said if there's compliance buyouts, and I'm Bergevin, I use it on Price, but Russ.
You got. I mean, look. So Russ and I have talked a bunch about this, and I've written it a bunch, and it's come out. Let's compare Lundqvist and Price. You got Lundqvist with 1 year left in his deal, right? You also have a clear future number 1, likely in Shesterkin, with a pretty good guy in Georgiev who can be maybe a number 1 somewhere down the road, but is a pretty good number 2.
Correct.
Along with Tyler Wall, who hasn't signed yet, Lindblom, who we don't know is going to be, Husko, who's in the system. So there's a pipeline. Right. Montreal is the same thing. But there's a difference moving on from a guy who's got 1 year left, who's shown cracks in his game, versus a guy who's got 7 more years left, who's making $10.5 million, and that salary would get him to move. Yep. You're talking about the guy who is by far the face of the franchise and the continued face of that franchise. For the Rangers, moving on to a guy like Shesterkin, that's a more seamless transition than what happened in Montreal, and people would go absolutely nuts in Montreal, even if it would be the right move to move on from him.
Well, the interesting thing about Demchenko, and maybe I'm just extrapolating here because we have a lot of time to fill, but he does not have a European assignment clause in his contract. It was an ELC, so he can go down to the AHL. Right. I get the feeling that this is a move for expansion, because if Lindgren is the backup goaltender to Price has got a no-move clause, so you have to protect him. And if you expose Lindgren, then Demchenko could be your backup in 2021. So I think
Demchenko probably doesn't have to be exposed, though.
No, but they have to. But they have to expose a goaltender.
Somebody, right? Yeah, agreed. Right. You're going to see a lot of cheap veterans also getting signed to deals beforehand, so they can be exposed.
I think the Rangers are going to do that too, and with somebody with previous service time.
JF Berube, who they traded for last year, they may try to just extend him and keep him around so they can expose him.
But don't they have to play a certain amount in the NHL? They just can't be a body.
But Berube has, we don't know what the number is.
Right.
Well, but the thing with this is, I think the missing ingredient here is, I don't know if they're going to hang on the Lindgren just so they could have him for expansion. They could. I'm trying to think who else is in their system.
Well, I mean, Primo got called up and played a few games, but Lindgren is still. I mean, they don't have. God, who was the kid that they drafted? That was Zach Fucale. They don't have.
Yeah, they don't have Fucale anymore. They don't have somebody else there though.
They don't have Mike Condon there anymore.
No, I think.
He's been on the team for parts of 5 years, Lindgren. The most he played was 14 games in 17-18. Overall, he's already played 6, 7, 20, 24 games. He definitely would hit that threshold in terms of to be eligible for.
Yeah, so they might hold on to him for that, but I still think Primo will be the backup. They may put Lindgren and Demchenko both in Laval and let it roll that way unless they find out Lindgren's got to play certain games, because I don't think they want to set Primo back, and he does seem like he might be too advanced for the AHL.
Well, and the other thing is, don't forget, Lindgren. So if Primo signed his ELC in March of 19, right, is he then technically eligible?
No.
You have to play 2 full years or something.
Right, so I don't think he'd even have to be exposed necessarily.
He wouldn't, and that's why.
This was his first year of NHL action.
Right. So after next year is only 2, which means you would not have to be exposed. So
he's exempt, just like in Toronto, Sandin and Liljegren are exempt.
And that's why I don't think they're going to hide him in Laval. I think they're going to actually use him.
There's no reason you don't have to protect.
Right. Now, Mark Peterson in the chat asks an interesting question. I don't think he would do this, but he says, what if Price has agreed to waive his no movement clause to be exposed in expansion?
Oh, sure. They do it in a heartbeat, but he's not going to do that.
I think Seattle would pick him.
Sure.
Maybe.
Well, they have an $81 million cap to fulfill. So
it doesn't mean you want to spend $10 million on a guy that you're going to hold on for 5 years, who the latter part of it may be a detriment to you.
But they could retain and flip.
They wouldn't flip. You're always flipping. They're not going to flip. If Seattle gets him, they would get him, and he would definitely work with whatever young goalie would be his backup. But also, got to remember, Vancouver's right over the border there. There's a lot of Canadians that would come over and watch Carey Price with a new Seattle team. There's no question in my mind.
He's from Western Canada. He's from Alberta. So
there's hordes of fans they would get from that. And I think he would be a drawing card, so they would do it, but I don't think it's going to happen. Okay,
some other news and notes, and we mentioned it earlier. Over the last 24 hours, both Jarmo Kekalainen and Bill Guerin, GM of Columbus, GM of Minnesota, have both commented that they are optimistic that there is going to be a season. Russ, I don't think they would say that this smacks of a trial balloon to me.
It does smack of a trial balloon. I just think, again, at least it's good to hear. Like I said, we don't hear from any Major League Baseball general managers because I don't think they feel confident with any of the plans. I think at least these guys feel confident with the plan. So we are hearing from them. And again, they're just saying finishing the season. None of them are talking about the regular season and the playoffs. They'll never use that wording. And I think they're careful to use that wording because I think the regular season's done and they don't want to say it. And Bettman doesn't want to say it. And that's fine.
I don't think you're going straight to the playoffs, though. I do think you need
there'll be that play-in for the team.
Certain number of games before you go into the playoffs.
Right. For those teams that were close, will definitely play in a play-in. They may have a couple of exhibition games. They might.
I mean, again, the thing that Brooks wrote, right, and what I believe him, right, the teams that are out of it, right, it all depends on how you're structuring this. If if you're forced to segregate and segment yourself, and you're a team that you know is definitively out of the playoff race, those teams might be less likely to be willing to be part of that equation because of the fact that
then I don't think they will be.
The season.
And that's why I don't think there will be any regular season games played because of like the Drew Dowdys out there that know, because of the LA Kings who know that they're not in the playoffs. They're like, what the hell are we getting together to play games in Manchester, New Hampshire, or North?
But I think what will happen, Jan, I think what could happen is I think there could be some exhibition games, like everybody plays an exhibition game. That's fine. Even a practice game, whatever. And then I think they'll have that play in for the 4 teams that are close. And then when they get those teams in, then the playoffs start. I think that's the way it's going to roll.
So you're thinking it's still a 16-team playoff for technically?
Yeah, 16. If they make it 18, fine.
I think personally, I think there was 24 teams that are around the 500 mark. I think they're going with the 24. And I think they figure a way to get down to your 16 seeds.
See, that's brutal to me.
I think I'm
a waste of time.
I think it's 20. And I think
you're looking to build revenue and you're looking to build excitement. What more could be? Remember, you and I go back, and so does Mike. The days of best 2 out of 3 in the playoffs, right?
Sure.
So,
and that's what I think it'll be. I think it'll be 20 teams with the bottom 2 in each conference playing a best of 3 series to play in. So it's basically a 4-team wild card instead of a 2-team wild card with a best of 3. I think it's that.
I do want to say I look back on those days as an aberration too, though, Jan. I don't think that those were the best playoffs. I do think they were do or die.
But I'm just saying, if you're looking to add the number of games, right, that's a way to still maintain a current system with not modifying it too broadly, because you can finish everything in about a week.
No,
so pick up the real playoffs.
Some of those series were brutal. I mean, like I remember like Buffalo playing Pittsburgh in '79. Losing in 3 games in overtime. George Ferguson scoring a goal in game 3 of a best. They split the first 2 and then they lost in overtime. The best of 3 series were. I mean, with some teams they got destroyed in 2, but most of the times it went to 3, and it was a very tight series. So it's.
And years ago, you had cross country travel. You had Rangers Kings playing each other in the first round, which is crazy.
I think Buffalo played Vancouver in one of them. So it was like
I'm going to give you the example of where I think you have to cut it off. In the East, right? You can make the argument for the Islanders and Rangers. Okay, there were some surges there. The Islanders were going the other way, but they had built in a pretty good record otherwise. Okay, are you really going to put the Florida Panthers in the playoffs? Does any of us think that they were on a route to get to the playoffs? I don't think so. And then in the West, I could see them putting Vancouver and Minnesota in because at least they were showing positive signs. Minnesota 7-3 in their last 10. They were the hottest. Does anybody think Arizona was making it to the playoffs, or Chicago? Really? I don't.
Well, okay. Look at the.
You really think Arizona was making it?
One of the things you might have to consider, and again, it all depends on how this all plays out. Right? Are they going to be segmented and sequestered? Are you playing in the home teams? Right? But let's presume all's normal. Right? You're going to tell me that the NHL would not want Chicago in the playoffs?
I'm not telling you that. I'm just telling you they were not a playoff team. That's what I'm telling you.
Right. I mean,
irrespective of that, we have to factor in who the teams are also, in my opinion. That may be unfair. I do think that does play a part in it as well.
Do they want Chicago in? Sure, because it's a big market and a popular team. Do they deserve to be in? No. I mean, I look at it right now, like in the East, Carolina and Columbus were the 2 wild card teams. You can make a case for the Islanders. They were 1 point behind and hadn't played. They played 2 less games, and the Rangers were at 79. I think that's as far as it goes. Florida down to Montreal, down to Buffalo. No friggin' way. And
if you get Chicago in somehow, then you're allowing either the Canadians or the Sabres, who really had no business being in the playoffs this year.
So are you saying 4-team playoffs? Would you go best of 3 for each conference?
Yeah, best of 3 for each of those.
Okay, and those are in essence your 7 and 8 seeds in each conference.
Right. Yeah, it would be in the East. It would be Carolina versus the Rangers.
Yep.
Columbus versus the Islanders.
Yep.
Best of 3. In the West, it would be Winnipeg versus Minnesota.
Yep.
Nashville versus Vancouver.
I'm all in on that.
Yep. Okay.
I just think that that's the way. Those were the teams that had a chance. Remember, in 12 games, even if you're 2 points back, but you're 4 or 5 teams out, it's nearly impossible to get in.
Yeah, I'm talking about inherent fairness.
Well, it's games played also, right? We don't have a level set in terms of games played, which is a factor.
No, but even if you did, I'm saying let's say everybody had 10. If you have 4 or 5 teams to jump with 10 games, you're not getting in.
Right, but if you have 2 games in hand and you're 2 points out, you start playing around with the numbers, you have a shot.
So what you do is you roll back to 68, and then you still do 20. So the records are all the same in terms of number of games played, and then you make it so that that's 20 teams. So it's fair for everybody. At least at that point, 68 games, everybody played the same amount of games, and then you make allowances for the fact that the season got cut off. But teams that were 3, 4, 5 points behind,
they were never going to make it.
They were never going to make it. So, all right. I want to touch on this because like I said, I've been writing about. We know and we think that the salary cap at best is going to be flat the next couple of years, and we know that the last time the CBA happened and there was a situation with the cap being around the same or there being an adjustment, there were compliance buyouts. I think it's not out of the realm of possibility that happens again as soon as next season. I've been looking at and writing up some things about teams, and I did the first half of the Atlantic Division last week. I did the other half this week, and I look 4 teams. We'll start with Florida. If I'm Dale Talon, I'm probably putting my hockey life in jeopardy if I go to Vincent Viola and say, I think we should buy out Sergei Bobrovsky because he's got 6 more years at $10 million per. But I'd be tempted, Jan, to do it based on how he's played the first year. The guy I would probably go and make the buyout for is Michael Matheson, because I think since they signed him to that 8-year contract, he's nowhere close to the defenseman I think they thought he was going to be. So if those were my 2 choices, I would personally, if I had the safety of saying I'm going to keep my job, I'd buy out Bobrovsky because I think Bobrovsky is on his way downhill after 1 year, and maybe he can bounce back. But what do you think?
So I have a couple of thoughts on that. So remember earlier before the trade deadline and post trade deadline, there was all the rumors that Florida had to cut about $12 million in salary cap because they wanted to free up the cash.
Right. The
question with the amnesty buyout and utilizing it is, are owners willing to bite the bullet and pay money out of their pocket to get rid of bad contracts is right. Obviously the key question. Regardless of who that player is, that's your number one question. So when you're proposing who it should be, is Viola willing to reach into his pocket, regardless of how much that dollar amount's going to be, to get rid of the player? If the answer is yes, then in my opinion, you need to do Bobrovsky because she's sure not earning $10 million a year over the next 7 years.
Yeah,
that contract looks like an aberration and nightmare right now.
It's a nightmare, but you know what, Jan? The way things have turned out now, Spencer Knight's no closer than he was at the beginning of the season to getting into this league.
Sure.
And so they have to be playoff competitive just to do anything in that market. So they're going to hold on to Bob for at least 2 more years before they even think about trading him, because they will be a no playoff team. And then Joel Quenneville will not want to be there. Like Joel Quenneville will be looking at him like, well, who's my goalie now? They won't have a goalie.
Unless you find somebody in free agency that you pay a lot cheaper and save that money to. Remember, there's a lot of talk they're going to have to try to get rid of Barkov in order to free up salary.
They're never going to get rid of Barkov. That's not happening.
Well, that was a rumor. I mean, I'm not going to, but that name was prominently mentioned a lot.
I think that's a bad rumor.
Well, Huberdeau was also mentioned too. So.
I agreed.
Huberdeau is the guy they would definitely part with before Barkov.
No question. But Barkov has, after this year, 2 more years at $5.9 million, and he's probably gone anyway.
Although
I don't know about that.
That question might be moot because they did move Trocheck, and I didn't expect them to do that.
But remember, there was $12 million was the number that was thrown about. Moving. They also got some money back in that trade, so it didn't clear all that cap room. So they still need to move a decent amount of money in that. And again, it's not a great market for even if you're in a playoff contention.
No, but I think Matheson's the guy that gets moved. I don't think Bob goes anywhere.
Right. High likelihood is that they have an amnesty buyout. Matheson is the guy they're going to move. But if Bobrovsky got moved, I wouldn't be floored by it.
Yeah, and Matheson's contract in terms of money, and this wouldn't be a factor with the compliance buyout because there'd be no cap ramifications. He's got a backloaded contract. He's making more than his AAV over the next few years. It goes up, and then it sort of
would help
back down.
Right.
So that it would be money out of their pocket, but a little more money. Whereas Bobrovsky's deal is ridiculously front loaded. He's making like $12 million, 11.5, 10 over the next few years. Now I realize I'm biased when it comes to the Leafs.
No.
But I looked at the roster and I said, okay, who is a candidate for compliance buyout? I can't come up with somebody.
Mike, I'm telling you.
I know. Let me just finish.
Go ahead.
You're not buying out the core four. You're not buying out Nylander, Tavares, Matthews, or Marner. You're not buying out Morgan Riley at $5 million or Frederick Anderson at $5 million, and you're not saving anything if you're buying out young guys who are in their early to mid 20s like Janssen, Kapanen, and Kerfoot. So I don't think, unless the NHL is part of this compliance buyout, allows teams to have money that is saved on salary retention or long-term injury, or just like a get out of jail free card where they give a credit. I don't think the Leafs I don't think they're buying out anybody if there's a compliance buyout.
I think they will buy out Alex Kerfoot. It's a $3.5 million savings. You're acting as if his 28 points are like 58 points. Like, again, if you can't replace Alex Kerfoot's 28 points, you got a problem as an organization. I think they could replace that, and I think they would rather have the money back than having the player. I think he's a really good player, but he's not a great player, and he's not certainly a life Leaf player where you're going to say, oh, yeah, we got to get Kerfoot signed to his next contract. He's got a few more years, and he is a decent NHLer. That's it. That's what he is, an NHL average kind of player. You could get somebody cheaper in the marketplace, or somebody from Toronto, from the Marlies, can get brought up. Well, you could solve that situation easily.
I got a better question for Mike,
sure.
Right? So they didn't sign Muzzin until relatively recently.
Correct.
If at that point in time Dubas knew that the cap is most likely going to stay flat,
right,
would you have given Muzzin the type of money he was going to get, knowing what the marketplace may look like moving forward?
He got 5.6, which is the highest paid defenseman on the team right now. I probably would have tried to get him at a little cheaper because I think they needed him. Of the three defensemen that they brought in over the last 18 months, he was the one that they had to keep. Barry, they could probably replace. Ceci has been bad. Muzzin provided the leadership and the physicality that they just don't have. So I would have signed him. I'd try to get him at a little more of a bargain, but they had to.
Would you have waited, though, till free agency to try to do it, expecting that? Well, let's say, would he have gotten more than that on the open market?
Yes, I think he definitely.
Even if the cap stays flat.
Yeah, I mean, he may have gotten he may have gotten less years, but I think he would have gotten more AAV. I think he was the second most attractive free agent defenseman on this market, and the first is Pietrangelo.
Okay, Russ.
What is the question again?
Muzzin.
If you knew the cap was staying flat when Dubas signed him, right? Mm-hmm. Would you have signed him to the deal he got? And do you think he would have gotten more in the open market and a flat cap?
No, I'd have signed him to the deal he got. I mean, Jake Muzzin's been very, very important for them. Here's what I think, and the reason why I think they would get rid of Kerfoot and get that money, because they'll use that money and get a defenseman. They still have a lot of young defensemen, and you don't know if they're all going to pan out. They could still use a veteran defenseman on that team in the worst way, and I think they need that more than they need Kerfoot. So, but Muzzin is going to anchor that defense for how many years is his deal?
4.
For the next 4 years, and he'll be good.
Yeah,
he may not be super, but he's going to be really good.
The problem, I agree with your assessment, Russ. The problem is they're not getting a veteran defenseman that is capable of helping their defense for the $2 million or $2.5 million or whatever they open up.
3.5. They could. And the cheaper
the replacement for Kerfoot is at center is likely Pierre Engvall, who's making $1.25 million. So you're only saving $2.25.
But Engvall's already on the cap. You're not using. It's not like you're all of a sudden spending Engvall's money. That's already spent. So you're just moving him into that spot. But you could get a $3.5 million defenseman. You could get somebody for that, Mike. Somebody who could actually help that team get better.
Now, Terry's GG&G in the chat says a fellow YouTuber that covers the Leafs suggests the Leafs can use the compliance buyout as leverage to take on a team's buyout. They can't do that.
I don't think they're going to do that.
No. But teams can't do that. You cannot trade for a player and then compliance buy him out.
But I don't think they'll even do that under this special rule is what I was talking about. Yes, normally you can't anyhow.
I mean,
well, the other question is going to be, like we've talked about, is whether or not does the compliance buyout allow you to get out from under dead cap space that you already have. So the Rangers, for the example, is can you find a way to utilize Kevin Shattenkirk's $6 million dead cap space this year? That may be an option. We don't know yet.
I know, but what I was told is it will be a use it or lose it function for exactly what it is.
I think you're going to get pressure from some of the GMs who are going to want to be able to utilize that in terms of that as the buyout.
Right.
We talked a lot about Hank, right? If the Rangers can't buy out Lundqvist, right, because they may not want the PR.
They'll buy out Brendan Smith. Very thankful.
Well, let's say you don't want to buy out Smith and Stahl, right? You could if you could utilize and fast forward the dead cap space you have.
Right.
For the current year, and you have $6 million left, let's say for Kevin Shattenkirk, and use that as your quote unquote compliance buyout.
Right.
You then are freeing up cap space similarly.
Sure, but I don't think they're going to be able to. I get what you're saying, but I don't think that's going to happen.
The thing is that the teams like Toronto and New York, two of the more powerful franchises in this league, are two of the teams that are going to get screwed by the compliance buyout because of the way that they have the rules set up based on the last time it was used in 2012. So that's why
that's the way
we don't know if it's. Look, the situation now is a lot different, right? So we don't know if anything's going to change. I would wager that's going to be a conversation that's had before an agreement is come to.
Yeah. Now, okay, Tampa Bay, an embarrassment of riches, we know. They have a guy like Anthony Cirelli, who's an RFA at the end of this year, who they have to sign. I looked at two contracts, good players, no problem with them, but it's just the financial situation that they're in. One is Yanni Gourde, who they signed to a long-term deal, he's making a little over $5 million. I think it's for the next 5 years. The other is Tyler Johnson, who's making $5 million for the next 4 years. Both are in their late 20s. I'll tell you one thing. I think Tyler Johnson is the guy who's going to go to Seattle in expansion. He's from Spokane. He's from the Pacific Northwest. I think Tampa Bay will end up trading him to him so they don't take some of their other players. But if it was me, I think I would buy out Yanni Gourde.
Yeah, Gourde's the guy I said. There's no question I would buy out Yanni Gourde because he was already the older player, and he's not been exactly what they thought he would be. He's been lesser point-wise, for sure.
Jan?
I mean, I'll probably agree with you. I mean, Johnson, I wasn't fully aware of the Spokane connection, so that is one that kind of makes a lot of sense in terms of keeping him for another year and then buying him out. I might have said, going into the season, Killorn. But he had a resurgence this year, and you've seen enough out of him and how much he provides that team as a third-line player, not just offensively, but also defensively as well in terms of the style of play. So I think Gourde is probably the guy, especially if you can flip Johnson's $5 million in contract next year and get him off your books as well.
Yeah, and some people in the chat were talking about some of the other teams in the Atlantic, and somebody mentioned Opposo. The Sabres are lucky because Opposo came back from a concussion and was playing when the season was stopped. So if there is a compliance buyout, they have the clearance to buy out Opposo. Because remember, if the guy's on LTIR, if he's injured, you
can't buy him out.
You can't buy him out.
Well, the Sabres may have lucked out in all of this because Bogosian walked away and Opposo they'll be able to buy out. That's a big savings for them. The question is, what will they fill those spots with?
They will use that money to sign Rasmus Dahlin to an extension.
Well, some of that, but they're going to still need to fill some spots on the team, too.
I think they're going to try to get Dahlin on an 8-year. I think they're going to try and get him on the Shabbat deal.
Well, here's the question. The Jeff Skinner deal right now is looking like an abject nightmare.
I said that's the deal.
It's too soon for that.
$9 million a year, Ross, for 7 more years?
I know, but it's too soon. Again.
Jan, let me give you this scenario. The only person who gets to buy out Jeff Skinner is a new general manager after Jason Botterill's been fired, because Jason Botterill's on death's door in Buffalo. And if a new general manager comes in and tells Terry and Kim Pegula, I think the most prudent move is to buy out Jeff Skinner, and they hire him, then it's going to happen. If they think that, no, that's ridiculous, then they'll hire somebody who won't say that that's what they should do.
I mean, who's on that second line for Buffalo?
Marcus Johansson, Dominic Cahoon,
Eichel. I mean, Johansson.
Eichel. It's Olsen, Eichel, Reinhart is the number 1 line.
Right, and so you're dealing with Johansson, and maybe Cahoon walked in there, and you're dealing with guys like VC, and none of those guys were helping. Yeah, I know, but none of those guys. He played this year though, Jan. That's what I'm getting at.
I'm saying is moving forward though. You're talking about moving forward.
No, I'm not talking about moving forward. I'm saying the reason Skinner was having such a bad year, he had nobody to play with either.
Right. He was playing on the second line, and see that the whole point of this, Russ, he scored 40 goals when he was at Eichel. Of course, Matt Molson scored 40 goals or close to 40 goals when he played with John Tavares. You need diversification of your.
No, but Skinner has scored in the 30s before too with Carolina, but he wasn't on lines with nobody. Right. He was basically on a line with nobody this year.
But are you paying $9 million for a second line winger now?
Right.
No, because I'm going to hopefully build up my second line and get him back to 30-something.
You'd have to really substantially build up that second line.
Well, but they have players that they can maybe do that with, Jan. That's what you have to hope.
He did a Jason Blake. He hit 40 goals in the year of free agency. I like Skinner as a player. He's not a 40-goal scorer.
Doesn't sound like it.
And he's not a $9 million player.
It doesn't matter whether he's a $9 million player anymore.
Well, it does now with the compliance buyout. You have the opportunity to clean that off your books because he's more of a $7 million player than a $9 million player, and you don't know.
So you clean that off and you keep Okposo. Is that really helping you as a team?
No. No, but I mean, the first option is Okposo. The second option would be if there were two compliance buyouts, I would buy out Skinner. I think there's only going to be one.
There'll only be one, but it just again, you're not even giving the guy the benefit of the doubt of having a bad year. You're not.
Russ, it's one thing if you have a bad year making $4 to $5 million a year. It's another thing if you have a bad year making $9 million a year. There's a vast difference between the two.
Again,
you're using 1/9 of your cap, 11% on a guy who did nothing.
It doesn't matter. Wait, he didn't do nothing. He was going to get 20 goals. He had 14 goals. No, but I mean,
Russ, if you're paying $9 million a year, you're not wanting 20 goals.
Not exactly good bang for the buck.
No, but 20 goals isn't nothing. Is my point? It's an off year.
Okay,
but
that's what it is.
But you paid him $9 million.
Right, I get it, Mike. But the point is, you can't afford to be without that guy because you don't have enough talent without him. Just to save the money doesn't help you as a team. If you're telling me the team is better without Jeff Skinner, tell me that.
No, it's not. It's not. But it's asset management. And I know you have to go in a few minutes, so I'm going to finish this up quickly. Yeah. The Bruins. They're not going to buy out Charlie Coyle, but I don't think that's a great deal. He's played well for them. But in year one of a 6-year extension, they would never do it. The one to me with Boston, the clearest buyout would be John Moore. They signed him to a 5-year free agent deal at a little under $3 million. He missed most of the season with a shoulder injury. He's not a bad defenseman, but
they don't really need him.
They got right. They have
you need the money to sign Torrey Krug potentially, or try to sign Torrey Krug.
I don't think they're going to sign him either.
Yeah, but 2.7. But as you said, waiving more, $2.7 million gives you a possibility.
You can at least make an offer, but I think he's looking for more.
They've got Lawson, they've got Vakanainen, they've got Clifton.
Yeah, it's not Krug.
No. But
it doesn't have to be. I mean, again, Matt Grizzly can be Krug.
If Charlie McAvoy takes a step forward, which he didn't necessarily do this year, then I will agree with you. If McAvoy plays as he has the last 2 years, then losing Krug has a bigger impact than even we're imagining right now.
I mean, if they re-sign Krug, which is probably not likely, but if they re-sign Krug, then they have to wait until Krejci retires to be able to use some of his money to pay McAvoy, because McAvoy's contract, he was a bridge deal. He only has a couple years left. So
yeah, I'll still bet on McAvoy at 22. I'm betting on him. It's not like McAvoy was devoid of a year. He had 32 points. I mean,
no, I agree. I mean, again, look, I don't think
it's not like Krug is a 60-point guy
every year back in Detroit, which is what most of us think. I mean, as you said, Krejci's got one more year left on his deal, and then he's probably gone after that.
Right. All right, guys, great show. Russ, we have some guests coming over the next few days.
We've got Dave Starman tomorrow. We'll talk about, Perinovich winning the Hobie Baker, Cornell losing their great season, which that was kind of rough for them because they don't have seasons like that all the time where they're a national contender. And also some of those free agent signings that we had talked about that, we can get into greater depth with because Dave works for ESPN and CBS. Then we also, on Thursday, we have Pierre Larouche. And Pierre was great because not only was he a great hockey player, he was a great golfer. We'll certainly talk about that Penn's all-time team because that's what he gets most identified with. But I'm sure there'll be some Ranger and Canadians talk too. He's a great guy. And I think people forget how great of a player he was. He was a highly skilled guy, man.
Yeah, but the problem was his work effort didn't always match the talent level was his problem, right? So 2 favors if I'm not on the next 2 days. One, if you can ask Starman what he thinks Morgan Barron's doing if he's going to come back to Cornell based upon some of the comments
Okay.
he recently made wanting to win the championship. And then Larouche, I sure as heck somebody's posting the Ooh La La Sassoon commercial.
Nobody's posting it. We might talk about it.
Oh, come on. You got to get it up there. It's on YouTube all over the place.
Nah, we're fine.
Friday we'll have Kevin Allen on the show.
Yep.
And for next week, we have former Hartford Whaler and New York Ranger Mike Rogers.
Yeah, I'm just nailing down the day with Mike.
Okay, so sometime next week.
105-point scorer, Mike Rogers.
Oh, yeah.
I had him on my Stratomatic hockey team.
Mike could light it up, man.
Yeah, and next Tuesday we'll have Matt Kalman on, who will talk some Bruins and
Mets, because he's a big Met fan. We talk about the Mets every time we get together.
We'll talk about how
Mike may have to keep quiet for the whole show if the three of us are on with him.
No. I'll talk about how Aroyd and J Lo.
Oh, stop.
He may be in the Boston market now, but he's from Queens.
Stop.
It's worse than the Wilpons.
It's not worse.
No, it's not.
It's not worse. I've decided
Mike,
it's
not even remotely close to worse.
Oh, God.
It's a guy who actually wants to have the Mets to do well.
Well, I mean,
I so hope so.
I don't want to have A-Rod be the final say for things, but I'll take it over the Wilpons.
All right. For Jan Levine, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.